I was an audience member at Jimmy Kimmel Live, and I gotta say, it was quite the experience.
Oh, hi, Mark.
What's up, Freccero fam? Welcome back to my channel. We'd like to experience everything that life has to offer. I just got back from Jimmy Kimmel Live, being an audience member. So in this video, I'm really gonna give you a behind the scenes look of what it's like to be part of a TV show, be in the audience, the interesting logistics of a talk show, and more. First off, how did I get tickets? There's a site called 1iota. Gotta give them a shout out. I have no affiliation with 1iota. What they do is they allow you to get free tickets for shows. I'm not gonna lie, it's one of those few situations in life that's a win-win. You may be wondering, like, okay, it sounds like an interesting experience being in the audience, being an audience member, but how much does it cost? It's completely free. It's kind of like a win-win where you get a free live show, get to experience it. It's a really cool experience overall being an audience member of a TV show, but also the TV show itself, in this case, the Jimmy Kimmel Show, gets a free audience. They don't have to pay for you to be in the audience. So it's one of those few situations I feel like in life that's a true win-win. And I gotta say, 1iota, gotta give them a shout out, is amazing. I've used them a bunch of times. I've gone to movie premieres before. I was a part of the MTV Movie and TV Awards. I've been an audience member for other shows. What's great is 1iota is completely free to use. And so what I did is I went to 1iota, looked at Jimmy Kimmel Live, and I tried to find, I thought would be a good show. I saw Larry David and Cyndi Lauper live on Jimmy Kimmel Live. Great. I thought that was a great lineup of Larry David, of course, with Seinfeld and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Huge fan of Larry David. And then afterwards, seeing Cyndi Lauper. Great lineup overall. And what you do is you request tickets on 1iota, and then you get potentially approved. There's been some times I requested to be in a show or a premiere or whatever, and unfortunately, I don't get the tickets. I'm not sure if it's like a lottery system or if it's first come first serve. I'm not sure how they do it, but in this case, I got an email saying, hey, you're approved for the Jimmy Kimmel Show. Now, there are a couple things you do have to be kind of like prepared for before the show, before even going. I think the biggest one is the dress code. As you can see here, they do enforce a dress code. Avoid solid white clothing or extremely complex patterns. No tank tops, hats, or excessively large logos. Shorts and lighter clothing are acceptable during warmer months. Avoid clothing that features inappropriate language, graphics, or offensive imagery. In addition, most studios are actually cooler than the outside temperature, and they're cooler than you think. And you can see that the show recommends attendees bring a light jacket. So for the most part, I didn't really have to like prepare anything per se. Just pick the right shirt, the right clothing. I actually wore this exact black v-neck, which I kind of regret. I'll talk about why in a second when it comes to me being in the audience, and I'll explain why this black v-neck can be a bit bittersweet when it comes to being in the audience. With that being said, let's now talk about getting to the show itself. He has his own location on the Walk of Fame. So if you're Ubering, you can Uber right to the location, of course. If you're driving, you do park at Ovation Hollywood. It's the main kind of parking garage for the Dolby Theater, all those different shops that are part of the Walk of Fame, this like big kind of complex, so to speak. And the good thing is 1iota does validate for parking. It is $3 for up to 4 hours of parking time. I decided to drive as opposed to Ubering, which is just a lot cheaper and easier, so I parked right at Ovation. And I'm gonna be honest, it is a bit of a long day, right? Like, I do suggest preparing a bit in advance, maybe plan to be in that area for a while, because here is the schedule. Check-in begins at 2:45. Priority check-in begins at 3, which I had a priority ticket. Then priority check-in ends at 3:15. General check-in's at 3:45. And then the filming is at 4:30. But typically, you want to get there roughly about a half an hour before check-in. So I parked around 2-ish p.m., walked there, got there around 2:15. There's already like a bit of a line waiting. You wait for a little bit. Then around 2:45, they check the tickets, being like, hey, you're a priority ticket holder. You're good to go. You then go in and you wait in this kind of like long alleyway. I will also say, if you want to sit, like say at the front row of the show, it's first come, first serve. You don't get like an assigned seat, so to speak. So let's say if you do want to sit front row, get there as early as possible. Once you kind of get in this like long alleyway, you wait there for almost about an hour. It's a bit of a long wait. You do meet people. It's kind of fun. You know, you're talking to people and everything, but it is a bit of a long wait. So just something to keep in mind. Then what they do is they go around, actually scan your ticket, making sure that it's a legit ticket, right? And then they check your ID to match it to the ticket. And then you get a wristband. This is the exact wristband they gave me. Nothing too fancy. It's just a black wristband. So after getting checked in terms of your ticket, your ID, you getting the wristband, all that kind of stuff, now the show portion starts to begin. First off, they walk you through a metal detector and search you before entering in the building. Makes sense, right? To be as safe as possible. Then they bring you into the main studio where they film the show. I will say, this is one of those really interesting things about TV. The studio is way smaller and a bit more cooler than you'd expect. It's not super cold. It's not freezing, but it's a little chilly. Like say, if you're someone who gets cold super easy, like I said earlier, definitely bring maybe like a light jacket or like a long sleeve shirt. I wore this and I was fine, right? So it's not too bad. But the size of the studio is really interesting because when you watch the show, I think because of like camera tricks and angles, they make the studio look way bigger than it actually is. When you actually get in there, you're like, oh, this is it. That's kind of interesting, right? And like I said, they do sit you first come, first serve, but they do sit you kind of randomly. I'm not sure. There's probably some science or method to the madness, but I remember it was interesting that the guy would like pick two people, be like, all right, you're going to sit here. He'd leave like 3 empty seats, then put someone in one of them. And the person seating us surprisingly took longer than you think. It almost kind of seemed like he was making like a chess move. Again, there's probably some reason behind this. I luckily got to sit second row. So here's a picture of me being in the audience. I do have myself circled. This is when it was Jimmy Kimmel and Larry David. I know it's near impossible to see me. Here's a more like zoomed up picture. I have my hands kind of above me so you can kind of like see me in the picture. And that's why I suggest, like say if you do want to see yourself in the audience, just as like a cool thing to be like, oh, look, like there's me. I think wearing like a bit more of like a brighter colored shirt is better. So the guy sitting next to me wore this like almost light teal shirt so you could pick him out a mile away. So for me, which is funny, when I was trying to find myself in the audience, I remember being like, all right, let me just find that guy. And then I'm sitting directly next to him. You can see me wearing the black V-neck, doing, this with my hands. I gotta say, overall, I had really good seats. So I'm pretty pumped about that. And on that note too, might as well say, given the picture I just showed you, they do not allow cell phones at all in terms of the studio. This is pretty typical for almost any taping, a movie premiere, a TV show. For most tapings, they do not allow cell phones. You do have 2 options. A, you can leave it in your car, right? After they check you in and check your ticket, you can just leave it in your car. Option 2 is they use this weird device called Yonder. Here's kind of like a video I got while waiting in the check-in line. They brought them around. In case you've never seen them before, it's kind of interesting. It's like this pouch. So they take your phone, put it in this pouch, lock it up, and give it back to you. So you do hold onto your phone per se, but it's in this pouch. It's like impossible to open or whatever. You need like a special device to unopen it. So you do hold onto your phone the entire show, but of course, make sure it's off, etc., etc. And as you're being seated, just to kind of pass the time, because you don't have your cell phone on you per se, right? They do play a bunch of clips of the Jimmy Kimmel show. I think it's almost like a mini warm-up, right? To kind of get you laughing and everything. Then after the entire audience is filled, they then have like a couple, I'll call them like hype men. These are the guys that kind of tell you what to expect, what's going on, etc., etc. And the main premise is this, kind of self-explanatory, but one, of course, make a lot of noise when big things happen, be exuberant. And then secondly, make sure you laugh at the jokes, right? They do say like, look, if Lexi makes a joke that maybe it's not the funniest joke, try to maybe laugh a little bit more than you would. I do think it's really interesting, like the psychology behind talk shows and all this kind of stuff on TV, because they did do one study, I remember, that they asked people, do you like laugh tracks? So not the Jimmy Kimmel live show, which of course has a live audience, but do you like fake laugh tracks? And they found in a study that most people said no. They do not like fake laugh tracks. However, when they actually did the research, even though people said no, we don't like them, when they tested them, showing them a TV show, one with a laugh track, one without, the people that watched a TV show that had a laugh track rated it as funnier, even though initially they said they did not like a fake laugh track. The psychology behind it, I'm not gonna lie, I think it's kind of interesting. But anyway, of course, they want you to be a fun audience, be upbeat, super energetic. So they had an initial guy kind of run through everything when it comes to the show, kind of get you excited. Then they bring out another guy who's a stand-up comedian who does like a lot of jokes, routines. He's like the guy to really try to get you riled up as well. And then they say, okay, it's time to film. And when it comes to the filming process itself, you do kind of watch the show as normally. There isn't really any weird or different things like They do it all pretty much in one take for the most part, besides a couple breaks for like commercials. Maybe they're doing editing or looking at other shots. But Jimmy Kimmel comes out, he does his monologue. They do have those signs that you may have seen in the movies or TV shows where it says like applause or stop applauding, whatever. They do have those there, I will say, but given my seat, I actually couldn't see any of them, but it's kind of self-explanatory, right? So he does his monologue. Then afterwards, he kind of goes off and then bring out the desk to the same location he did his monologue. I feel like when I watched the show, when I first saw it, I pictured it that he does a monologue like here, and then all the way over here is his desk. No. They bring out the desk to that same location. And I feel like this does kind of give the illusion that the studio itself is bigger than you think. For example, when I went to Conan O'Brien's taping, they did already have the desk there in addition to the monologue. They did also, by the way, as a side note, allow you to film in the studio before they started filming, which is kind of cool. Kind of interesting that each show kind of does things just a little bit different. And then after the desk is brought out, he does the interviews, and then the show ends. He does thank you. He's like, hey, thanks for coming, everybody. It means a lot to me, etc., etc. And then that's it. And I'd say the entire process of them filming takes about an hour, maybe like an hour and a half. So I'll say the entire thing from start to finish, which was cutting it close when it comes to parking, took about 4 hours. When I left the parking garage, I looked at my time, actually timed it a bit, and it was 3 hours and 50 minutes from the time that I parked to the time that I left the parking garage. So it was about 4-ish hours, which I remember being like, shoot, I hope I don't go over the 4 hours and have to spend more for parking or whatever. But luckily, I was okay. That 4 hours was fine. And I gotta say, the entire experience was pretty awesome. It's really interesting, like I said, sitting in that studio audience, watching everything happen behind the scenes. Of course, I think the energy of the room is a lot higher as well. And I feel like this isn't too surprising that the energy of the room, like when you're watching it live, it's a lot funnier and more engaging and energetic than when you just watch it at home. I feel like that's true for anything, like a concert or a live stand-up show, whatever the case is. Like I said earlier, back in the beginning of this video, this is all 100% free. I guess minus the parking or the transportation to get there. So let's say if you're visiting LA, which was interesting. I feel like 90% of the people I met were actually not from LA. They were visiting LA and they're like, hey, why not go to a Jimmy Kimmel Live show? It's free. Why not do it? And I feel like this is a great way to plan out your day, because whether you live in LA or not, that main area, which is basically the Walk of Fame, has a bunch of very famous hotels, shops, restaurants, unique attractions, and a lot more. So I feel like it's a fun thing to do. Like say, whether you're visiting LA, or whether you live here, to go there, I suggest being honest, maybe getting there a bit early, walking around the Walk of Fame, get in line around 2:15, and then you'll probably get out, I'd say around maybe 5:45, 6 p.m. back on the Walk of Fame. And at that point, maybe grab some food. There's an In-N-Out right near there. I love In-N-Out. Or go to a different restaurant. There's also a bunch of bars that you can go out to afterwards, like Good Times at Davy Wayne's is one of my favorite ones that's really close to that location. In general, there's just a lot to do in that area. And I gotta say, the entire experience of getting the tickets, getting to the show, being in that kind of environment, seeing kind of what happens on behind the scenes is super interesting. Learning a lot, again, about how they do it as well. And especially on top of all this, it's completely free. Being an audience member is an awesome experience.